And we're back for another episode of Startup Hustle, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. If you want to start, own, or build a business, then you're in the right place. We bring you the real truth about what it's like to take something from concept to launch. From growth, innovation, experience, failing, or winning big, we've got you covered. So let's get down to business with another episode of Startup Hustle, brought to you by Fullscale.io.
And we are back. Thank you, listeners, for joining us for yet another episode of the Startup Hustle podcast. Today's episode of Startup Hustle is sponsored by Fullscale.io, helping you build a software team quickly and affordably. Thank you, Fullscale. We love you so much. I am Lauren Conaway, your host, founder, and CEO of InnovateHerKC. And today, we have with us something of a phenom, a maven, if you will, in the nonprofit sector. Wanted to talk to Katie Lord. She is Vice President of Nonprofit Development at Proof Positioning, and she is a thought leader in the space, a trusted guide to many, just an incredible mind, just absolutely brilliant when it comes to nonprofit strategies and fundraising and all of those things that are so important to those who serve. So, Katie, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to have this opportunity and to chat with you, Lauren. Any opportunity I have to chat with you, it's yes, whenever.
Same. I feel exactly the same. So let's hop right into it. And I'm just going to ask you, tell us about yourself. Tell us about Proof Positioning. Tell us about your journey. How did you get here? That's a lot of different questions, kind of all snowballed into one. But just tell us a little bit.
Well, so how I got here is kind of one of those things where I think we all say, like, I never thought I'd be where I'm at right now. And you just kind of have to pinch yourself. So I started out in college, like most people, not understanding or knowing what I wanted to do. But I knew that I loved people and I liked to talk to people and I wanted to help people. So that's very, very broad with kind of no clear path on what that's going to be. So I got a degree in psychology and communications from KU, so Rock Chalk, and fell into fundraising, which is what most people do. So I started volunteering a lot in college and decided that I really loved volunteering. I started out on the association side of things and then went into full on like nonprofit 501c3 fundraising, which, I have to credit my husband. He was the one that knew I was volunteering and loved what I was doing with my volunteer work and was like, hey, that's a job. So why don't you do that and get paid for it and love your job? So from there, I worked for 3 large national nonprofits kind of in quick succession. And then around my 8-year mark, they kind of, they say the 7 or 8 year itch is what you get sometimes. And was kind of seeing some, I don't want to say problems in the sectors, but some opportunities for growth in the sector that it didn't really matter what organization's name was on the door, that there were just some systemic issues within the nonprofit sector, as I think we find in any sector. So through kind of chance and good luck and networking, I was able to switch kind of from the in nonprofit to working on nonprofits. And I worked at a consulting firm where I focused on capital campaign fundraising. So my project sweet spot was about projects from about $2 to $20 million. And I had clients mostly regionally, but also had some clients on the coast, which was great. But kind of like anything, capital campaigns are very rote. They're very prescriptive, and there's not there's innovation, but nobody wants to be the one that you try your innovation on. It's like, oh, that's such a great idea. I just need to raise my money. And so go try that on somebody else, but tell me how it goes and then we could do it later. So there's kind of not a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, so to speak. When you're being a steward of somebody else's money, you don't want to make the wrong decision and be perceived as wasting funds. And so how it happened is happenstance again is I was working on a couple of campaigns campaigns. And Grant, the founder and CEO of Proof, who I'd known for several years, I started running into Proof's work with some nonprofits, which was surprising because I always had them in my head as for-profit. So I called Grant up and said, I have 2 projects that you're working on, and, thanks for helping write some of the things I needed to have written, thanks for helping with that. But I didn't think you did nonprofits, it's time for us to get coffee anyways, let's chat about that. We had coffee, and he said, I think we're only doing 5 or 6 nonprofits. The nonprofit space in Kansas City, or just in general, is a very tight-knit community. Even though we're the 3rd largest sector in the United States, we still, it's a very specialized field. And so everyone kind of knows what everyone's doing, everyone's business, if you will. And I thought it was odd that I had 2 clients that were working with him that seemed a little too happenstance. So I told him to go back to the office and count. And he texts me several hours later and is like, we've worked with 25 nonprofits. And so just kind of from there, conversations just started to happen. And I joined the team a year ago, a year ago now. I joined the Proof positioning team to help build out the nonprofit strategy for Proof. And it's been just an awesome ride ever since. Even with the global pandemic and things, we've really been able to, I think, focus in on what nonprofits need. Nonprofits need innovation, but we need to create almost safe innovation, if that makes any sort of sense. Whereas we can show results and we can show that it's a good value for investment for nonprofits, and that the payoff will be worth kind of the uncomfortableness and the risk. So that's how I got here, and I'm loving every minute of it.
That is quite a story. And so what I find really interesting, and there are a couple of different things that we're going to talk about in there. But the first being, so you're kind of building use cases with Grant. Like I know Grant, he's a data guy with a huge heart. But I find it really, really interesting that, you've touched all of these nonprofits, and I think it sounds like you have the opportunity here to kind of create best practices and ways to absolutely innovate within an industry that is sometimes a little resistant to that. So I love that you're taking on that work. That must be tough.
It is, but it isn't. So I would say what's tough is it's just education. I think nonprofits are always looking to create deeper relationships with their donors. They want to be innovative, but again, there is a bit of just protection and safety because of, again, you are being stewards of dollars that you raised and that people invested in you. There's also very much in the nonprofit sector, if you will, of like a gotcha culture of, this nonprofit misused these funds, or we need to, do an expose on how this nonprofit did a bad thing. People love those stories. And so, while people want to really give and try new things, there is always a little bit of that worry of, am I investing my dollars wisely? And so what I would say is, we started out kind of building the airplane as we were flying it. We had really good bones from everything that Grant and the team had done with the for-profit sector, but it doesn't always work in the nonprofit sector. And so we were able to really kind of drill down, if you will, into some core products that we created for the nonprofit sector that really address the uniqueness of their needs, but still keep the integrity of Proof's emotional data and emotional research, and be able to offer that to a sector that, to say is emotional is an understatement.
Yeah. Well, so, and that makes total sense. And we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into that here in a second, but I actually want to backtrack a little bit. And I want to talk about your journey a little bit as a leader first. You mentioned that when you were in college, you volunteered a lot. And I've always been really curious, where's your heart as far as volunteerism? Where did you volunteer? What were your causes?
So when I first started out, my causes were children and animals. So I originally So I originally did a lot of work with local animal shelters. I lived in Lawrence at the time, and then also worked for the March of Dimes, and then also the Douglas County Senior Services Center, because I kind of felt like we need to take care of everybody on the spectrum. So it's kind of like a lifetime of care. With my journey, what I would say I'm really passionate about right now is kind of threefold. Is I'm very passionate about childhood abuse and neglect. So I sit on the Jackson County CASA board and a couple of other organizations that focus on childhood abuse and neglect. And women's issues are always going to be something that I'm passionate about.
Yes.
We've got so much we need to do, specifically looking at numbers in the nonprofit sector, but just wider. And I have a 3-year-old daughter, and it's going to be different for her. It will be different. We've had so many great women that have come before us, and it's our job to continue to blaze that trail, if you will. And then also just, I think that there is, again, things that need to be changed in the nonprofit sector. And so I would say what I've kind of more recently become passionate about is barriers to entry in the field of nonprofit. And also, how can we rapidly innovate and create that culture of innovation within the nonprofit sector without it being stigmatized? So those are kind of, I would say, my three passion projects. I still love animals. I have 2 shelter dogs at home, which are great. But right now, those are kind of my main focuses.
Well, I love hearing about all of that. We talked a little bit before we started recording about my weird passion / obsession with animals. And of course, women's issues just speaks to my heart. So let me ask you this. You also mentioned that, you have a very supportive husband. And I'm curious, like you have a strong supportive network, and how integral have they been to your journey and being able to do what you're passionate about?
Vital. I would say they're the key. It's vital. I was just talking in the office the other day. Nobody's a self-made person, and so I do hate it when I hear self-made man or self-made woman. That's a myth. People are not self-made. There's always people that help you, and I would say I have been continually honored to have strong mentors, strong advocates, strong bosses who have given me opportunities to flourish and to try things and to fail, and have always been able to teach me new things. So I would say that it is a necessity to have your personal board of directors, to have a strong support system, of friends and family and extended network in order to accomplish anything. You might know some things, but a lot of other people know a lot of other things that you don't. You need that information, and you need to always come with an open heart and an open mind to what other people have to teach you. I've always said I would quit the sector if I felt like I knew everything, and I will never quit the sector because I will never.
Yeah, I don't feel like that's a thing that's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, you never can, and I think it's a very dangerous position to put yourself in if you do think you know everything. I think then you need to pause and have some self-examination during that time, because there is just constant knowledge. It's so important to not only look ahead at people that have accomplished what you would like, who are, mentors and leaders and people that you really look up to. But it's also very important to have people that are just starting their journey, because while you might feel like you're mentoring them, and I definitely have some people that I feel like I mentor, they mentor me just as much and teaching me like all these new amazing things that I didn't know. I just had a meeting on Friday with someone, and she was sending me like all these new cool technology tools that you can use to thank people. And it was just like this great light bulb moment. And so, I mean, I feel like I got more out of that conversation than she did. And so it's so important to, have peers that you rely on. It's important to have people that are behind you in your career and ahead of you, really cheering you on. I don't really credit anything I've done to what I've accomplished personally. It's been a team effort. And again, just from a completely supportive network, and just people believing in you and saying, yeah, you should do that. If your mind says no, I'm going to tell you to do it, and here's why.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's one of the things that I noticed about you. Like you are extremely intentional about making sure that people feel acknowledged and seen in your journey. And I love that about you. You definitely have a servant leader heart. So thank you for that. And that's actually, it leads us into my next question, which is, there's this understanding that people who work in the nonprofit sector, we're underworked, we're underpaid, and so it takes a very, very special type of person with a courageous heart to be able to commit to that and not get burnt out and not get frustrated. Where do you think that comes from in you?
Two things I would like to add, though. When you said, we're overworked and underpaid, and then we have compassion fatigue. it's like and. I think my parents were, I would say, very, very integral in that. Very much. My parents were not the typical millennial, like helicopter parents. Like if something didn't get done, it was like, they would never pick up the phone and be like, why didn't Katie get this? They would be like, okay, well, what did you need to do? What do you either need to work harder, practice more, or pick something else?
Yeah.
And my dad was in the military. I moved around a lot. So when you change friends every 2 to 3 years, you have to learn to be supportive. And, without going too deep into personal, I definitely experienced bullying growing up. Being a new kid, constantly kind of put a target on you a little bit as someone who is new and other. And so with, sometimes kids that had, their parents had gone to high school together. And so that creates sometimes a feeling of, I would just say, dismissiveness or being dismissed. And I always said, I want people, the most important thing you can do to someone is see them. Not necessarily, you might not know how to help them, but it's just important to be seen and to feel validated. And so I think that's kind of maybe where it's come from, is just, having to go in and not know anybody and be like, okay, I'm going to make new friends this year again, or I'm going to, we're going to move again. And, and I would also, again, just say that my parents were always very supportive of anything that I wanted to do. I loved volunteering early on. My parents definitely demonstrated that in our home. We volunteered as a family. We donated together. So it was seeing that learned behavior, but then also a phrase I like is kind of bootstrapping it a little bit. I mean, your parents don't go to school with you, so you kind of, playground rules live. And so, that's kind of where I would say it kind of came from. But also it's one of those things that those experiences, I truly believe that sometimes when things are happening, you don't really understand why they're happening. And you're like, this is the worst thing ever. But something good's going to come out of it. And there's a lesson you needed to learn. You're just not going to see it right then. And so just kind of through that reflection, I think, that's maybe where it comes from. But I just want so much for people to just be seen and heard. And again, I might not have the answer, but hopefully I know someone that can help.
That's amazing. I love hearing about that. And I've always been very curious about you in that regard. I mean, I'm curious about anyone who has as I said, like a heart for, this very difficult work. But in particular you, because I've always liked you. I think you're a cool. So let's talk about, I want to kind of take the bird's eye view of the nonprofit sector. So you referenced that the nonprofit industry has some systemic issues that they need to work through. And so I'm very curious to hear your take on that.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Where to start?
Yeah. I know that's a very big question, but I have full faith in you.
So talking about systemic issues, first and foremost, it's the scarcity mindset. Nonprofits are founded on scarcity. We have a scarcity mindset that it's never going to be enough. We always need more, and that there's not enough to go around. And that causes us, I think, to sometimes use tactics and employ things and employ marketing and donor acquisition and things that are very transactional and really not at the heart of what our organization really needs to be focused on. I think it's a distraction to always just think you need more instead of really being thoughtful about what you have and how to cultivate that. People spend, I always say that if, you had a donor in your backyard who, dangled $100 bill, and then you had a donor down the street that dangled a $50 bill, everyone would run towards the donor with a $50 bill because they were new, instead of turning around and seeing the $100 bill behind them. We really need to be, fishing from our own pond, if you will. We need to be cultivating and building those relationships with the people that we already have, that are already fans and that already love us. They need to feel the love. And I think we're constantly always chasing new donors who actually don't stick around. I mean, statistically, donor turnover is, upwards of 50%, 50 to 60%. We don't get a second gift from people that we acquire. Whereas we have people, like I said, that are, really wanting to love us, and we're not hearing them. So I think that's a huge issue right there. I think I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the gender issues, as well as the race issues that we have in the nonprofit sector.
Please do. We are here for that.
Yeah. So first of all, women make up 70% of this sector, but the top 20% of people who hold the title of CEO of that 20%, 80% are male. So of the CEOs, 80% of CEOs are male and white male. And then if you look at the other 20%, I think I read somewhere that 3% are people of color and women of color, and the rest are white females. There is a gender pay gap in the nonprofit sector. I think we really need to be focused on diversity of the sector. I think, I've been doing a lot of examination, recently, as I hope everyone has been on continually examining their journey. But we need to be partnering with and working with our brothers and sisters of color to be accomplishing the work that we're trying to do. We need to kind of step away from the white saviorism a little bit and really focusing on partnering internally with communities and working alongside, instead of, I think sometimes the nonprofit sector, and this is just across the board, I think we think we know best. We have the best solution to a problem, instead of sometimes listening and understanding what those solutions might be.
Yeah.
And stepping outside of that. And so those what I would say are kind of really big systemic issues. And then I would also just say innovation in the sector. Again, just being afraid to, lose money. And some of that, unpopular opinion, I think sometimes we feel like our hands are tied from funders, that we can't innovate because we don't want to lose that funding. There are definitely funders that are all about innovation, and we have some very great ones here in Kansas City, but not all communities are as lucky as we are in that space. And so by trying and failing, sometimes you lose funding. So
Right.
that's a risk a lot of organizations aren't willing to take, even though we have a huge opportunity to fail forward and to bring the sector, alongside our corporate partners. We sometimes get the, nonprofit workers are less than, and I call it like the head patting. It's kind of like, you're so sweet working in the nonprofit sector, and you must have such a servant heart. It's like, I deserve to get paid just like everybody else. I'm doing work like everybody else. We need to get rid of that stigma that just because I'm working here and I have a servant heart, and most of us do, that does not equal economic stability or parity with our for-profit community. And so I think that there's kind of that stigma that we still need to get rid of. People are programs. People are the ones that are coming in every single day, day in and day out, providing services. And so they're not overhead, because you would never say a person is overhead in a for-profit sector. You would see them as, customer relations or sales. Same thing as in the nonprofit sector. The peoples are really providing the programs and services and are vital to the work we do. So they're not overhead. They are program implementers, if you will.
Yeah. One of the things that has always frustrated me most about operating in the nonprofit sector is the fact that funders hesitate to give money when the stated use will be addition of staff. Funders don't like to fund operations, basically. And that's always been super frustrating to me, because if you are truly when it comes to programming and when it comes to expanding and scaling, to your point, people would never hesitate to do that in the for-profit sector. People give you the ability to scale. People give the ability to operate with excellence so that you're not just kind of scrambling all the time. And I do feel like that's an area where the nonprofit sector kind of falls down, because all of these funders, they want their money to be going to very, very tangible support structures. But the fact is, like, people are the ones who run the programs, and they're the ones who make these things possible. So that's always frustrated me. And it's something that I've found time and time again with nonprofits that I've worked with.
Yeah, and to be quite honest with you, COVID-19 has exacerbated that a little bit, as far as what people are willing to invest in and to pay for. And I think that, again, if you look at any venture capital or anything, expanding a team is kind of a given in order to be able to do the work. And we need to look at it, again, the exact same way, that the need isn't going away and we can serve more with more people. And that is an investment in accomplishing the mission that our organization was founded on.
Yeah. So I think I watched a TED Talk once upon a time, and of course I'm not going to be able to remember the name of it, but it was essentially a boiled down version of what we're talking about. The fact that
love him. I think it's it's basically, what's wrong with the funding? I can't remember what the title was, but
I can't remember what the title is either.
But it was Dan Pallotta, and he is I would love to see him in person, business crush on that man. So it's so important. And how many years ago was that talk? A long time ago.
And yet the issue still persists today.
Yeah, that's right. And yet we're still here talking about the exact same thing, which should show that the nonprofit sector sometimes is like turning the Titanic. It takes a long time to shift.
Yeah. Well, and then another thing that I kind of wanted to pick your brain on is the fact that there's this misconception, and I think that it exists both within the sector and then on the outside looking in, that nonprofits can't be profitable. There's this misnomer that nonprofits are expected to kind of maintain a certain level of revenues, but that you cannot look at a nonprofit like a traditional business.
I think that's completely irresponsible, because you would never say to a company like, "Oh, you shouldn't make money."
Yeah.
Because the reason a nonprofit would make money, and I'm using air quotes, which you can't see, but make money, is that's what endowments are for. It's for rainy days, like right now, like the problem that we're having right now with COVID-19 and how organizations are suffering. That's what having that extra cushion is to be able to continue to operate efficiently and effectively and not be stressed out about, reducing programs, going out of business. It's just responsible for nonprofits to have a healthy balance sheet, to have money in the bank. And, everyone likes to think like, well, it's not my money that's in the bank. Well, why not? Focusing on sustainability is a responsible gift as a donor as well. Because again, you're ensuring that your organization will, survive if there's a natural disaster or, a fire. It doesn't have to be something as catastrophic as a global pandemic. But fires happen all the time. What happened if, you lost your building or something of that nature? You need to be able to rebuild and to continue services. And so I agree. I think when I look at organizations and I look at their 990s and tax filings, I always look to make sure that we're not, ending at zero every year. Because I think that's a little too close to almost living paycheck to paycheck, if you will, and needs to be something that we change the narrative, is that money's still going to go to work. And, if the money's invested, the organization takes that money to invest in innovation and or continue to work programs. It's not like it's sitting there completely untouched. They always take some sort of distribution from it. So I consider it financial health, and I agree. It's disheartening that narrative again continues to persist.
Well, and I think I read somewhere, so right around the beginning of COVID, I actually belonged to a for-profit, for-purpose business mastermind group. And I love belonging to this group, but right around the time when COVID hit, we all had to have a lot of really serious conversations about sustainability. Like, how were we going to weather this storm when we didn't have, we didn't have a playbook, we didn't have a finite end time. I mean, we're still in the middle of COVID-19, and there's no real end in sight. And so I think at one time I read right around that time that most nonprofits have less than 3 months of operating runway in the bank at any given time. And that's a really scary thing. Like, when you look at the health of a traditional business, that's not good, you know?
Yeah.
It's very much the same with nonprofits. But to your point, like, even beyond just survival, nonprofit organizations, when they're operating with a surplus, they're able to take that surplus and they're able to reinvest it back into the business of service. And, I think that's kind of that's really the goal. So we have to start not just understanding, like reimagining our understanding of what nonprofit structures and strictures can look like, but we also have to change the way we talk about it.
Definitely. Oh my gosh. Yes. I love that. I'm just like putting up my hands like, yes. Yeah. And I actually, to just kind of piggyback on what you just said, I'm incredibly excited about the B Corp model and for-purpose companies. I think that is something that, I hope that we continue to see more of, as I think that you can create the best of both worlds with both business and philanthropy. So I'm very excited to see that area of business continue to grow and flourish, and to kind of see how that changes the narrative a bit as well.
Yeah, there's most definitely been the rise of the hybrid model, and I hope that is a kind of precursor to the kind of systemic change that we're talking about. That would be incredible.
It would be.
So I'm gonna switch directions on us just a little bit, and I'm gonna ask you. So one of the things that you mentioned was the fact that when you're operating in the nonprofit sector and you're talking about the need to innovate, I have two questions for you. It's a two-parter. Number one, what are some examples of innovation within the nonprofit sector you've seen or that you've led initiatives in? Talk to us a little bit about that, and then the follow-up. And I can remind you of this a little bit later, but the follow-up is, how do you talk people into innovating it within the nonprofit sector? I can imagine that would be very difficult.
Yes. So there's some really cool innovation that's happening in the sector. And, to give you an idea of a time that it failed, but it was fun. So I actually worked on a project at my previous organization where we tried to basically digitize consulting. We tried to work kind of on a consulting model that was distance consulting. And this was like before Zoom was cool and everybody had it. And we had a partner on the East Coast, and it was, the uphill battle was education. And okay, why would I, work with a consultant who isn't on call all the time? So it was a little bit more of creating kind of systems and structures and creating a digital version of consulting, if you will. And it didn't work out, but it was really fun trying. And the reason that I would say it didn't work out is because people were very afraid of not having that like human connection. I mean, I think if it kind of, I hope that they're thinking about relaunching it right now, because I think that now that people understand that like we don't have to be in the same room and we can create this community virtually, it's just, I think it was ahead of its time. I think it was too early. And I think the education piece was just maybe not there as far as why would you do this versus, having someone from your backyard consulting type of a thing. So that was a time it didn't work. But, another time that it works, and there's some great organizations that are doing it right now, that we're, even talking with and partnering. And I think strategic partnerships, by the way, are just incredible. I think that's how the nonprofit sector is going to grow. I think that's how business is going to grow, is creating, win-win solutions. But it's really, it's using analytics and data and creating data. It doesn't necessarily have to be data driven, but I would say data informed decision making, where you have the data, but you also keep kind of the human element into it, as far as being able to take what you learn about people and break those down into segments and silos, if you will, and to be able to talk to those people the way that they want to be talked to. There's several organizations that are kind of working in this space. We kind of all do it a different way. And some organizations are focusing on like bequest giving, and some organizations are focused on taking which this is kind of scary, but like taking your social media profiles and your activities on social media and then predicting what kind of content you would be interested in, and kind of integrating that into asks and requests from nonprofits to build engagement. So there's a lot of really cool applications are just starting to proliferate, even for the fundraiser on, it used to be you had to go back to the office and you'd have to type in your reports, and now you can literally talk to text and your report's done from the field. There's some really cool things about how you can actually automate. In fact, this is something I learned just a couple days ago, where you can, automate video content and create that to create a personalized thank you to send to somebody through your donor database. There's so much growth, I would say, just even in the technology space, that I'm really excited about in how it can be integrated into philanthropy. Let's just be clear. Philanthropy, people give to people. They don't give to organizations and institutions, and never is that more true than the millennial generation. However, there are ways to build and create community through the digital landscape that we've kind of ignored. Pre-pandemic, people were saying online donations were anywhere from 10 to 15% of their focus, as well as, like digital content. I would love to see what that is now, because I think going forward, it's going to have to be 25 to 30%, because, we're in the age of, I can't go sit with my donor. I can't go shake hands. I can't go have coffee with them for extended periods of time. And so how can we use what we have as far as technology and still create those intimacies and that relationship that is so craved and is so vital to the sector?
I love that. And I mean, the insight that you're dropping is just incredible. So thank you for sharing that. So final conversational question. Let's talk a little bit about that resistance to innovation. So how do you, when you are talking to clients through Proof, and I have to say, like, I know that Proof Positioning does incredible work. Like I've talked to many people who have worked with Proof Positioning, and the feedback is always just glowing. But how do you attack the resistance, just as an organization or as an individual? I'd be really interested to hear, some of your tactics.
I think, I think there's kind of a multi-prong approach there. First off, what I would say that I love that Proof does just incredibly well, and I was so excited when I joined the team, is just content, educational content. I would say we do much more content marketing than anything else. We try to, kind of give some of it away, if you will, in the fact that that's the right thing to do. And we try to just educate people. I think, again, education is probably the biggest opportunity that we have with Proof. I think, I'm going to say Proof a lot in this next few sentences. So social proof, social validation. I think it's very important that we let our clients and potential clients talk to each other. Here's what was great. Here's what was, here's what wasn't. And that also just helps us get better. But I also think that we're very blessed that we have a lot of happy people that, might talk about what their reservations were. Here's why I was kind of on the fence. What I would also say is, so how you talk to a for-profit company and how you talk to a nonprofit company are just a little bit different. We have to talk, both want to know ROI, but above that, they also want to know, how can this create stronger relationships with their donors instead of just getting the sale. It's not just getting the sale, if you will, or getting the gift or donation. Which, by the way, you have to use completely different lexicon. Still working on Grant with that. But you have to be able to assuage fears that this isn't a bad decision, and also make it okay to say no. It has to be safe to say no. I never take a no, whether I was fundraising and asking somebody for $1 million or in any sort of situation. A no is not a no forever. It's not right now. Now's not the right time. And that's okay. You have to make it safe to say it's not right now. What happened when we did come to proof, though, is nonprofits, we're very tactical people. I'm a tactical person. And I can do that. I can see it in my daughter too. Like, she's a very tactical person. So we're tactical people. So something that I implemented when we came to Proof is we ordered folders, and we created one-pagers and leave behind, something that Proof never had, because as a development director, as someone in the field, we leave behind gift packages. We still have paper, and we still have attachment to tactical things that I can revisit later. So even if now's not the right time to have Proof, you might still keep that Proof folder, and 6 months from now say, okay, now's the time. I just had that happen literally the other day. It wasn't the right time, and out of the blue, I get an email, hey, we weren't ready. I think we're ready now. So that was something that I implemented that seems so simple and so easy, but it's kind of sector specific. We're just a very, tactical or tactile sector. And so, but also, it's the little things. So I like to treat all of my clients, current clients, past clients, potential clients, people who've said no and are never going to work with me. I think it's important that we keep those relationships, we steward. So for example, when we were home for 3 months, I sent, I think 150 cards out. Of just like hey, how are you doing? Like, here's a fun quote that I thought of you. And I don't know if they impact at all. I get so much joy out of writing these that, it's just important that we connect on a human level. And if we can do business, great. But if not, that's great too. And, hopefully down the road, we can do something together at some point.
Yeah, I love that. And I would have to say that again, that's one of the things that I've just noticed about you, the fact that you are so open to connection, and I love it. So thank you for being who you are. I have one final question for you. You ready?
Yes.
It's your fun question. And it's kind of related to what we've been talking about, but somebody hands you $1 million and you can't spend it on yourself. Where do you put it?
Oh, that's a hard question.
It could be multiple answers. You can break it up.
Okay, can I break it up, or does it have to be a lump sum? So what I would definitely do is I would set up I wouldn't say a foundation, I would set up a donor advised fund and make sure that organizations that I really care about would continue to have some sort of legacy and consistent income. I would also want to invest in, kind of angel invest, or, something where I didn't get return, but just invest in B Corps and growing the B Corp and some of those sustainable business practices. For sure. And then those are probably the two things. And then I'd probably want to send up some sort of scholarship for access to philanthropy school, or, trainings or something like that, for just creating accessibility, I guess, to the sector for women and people of color. That would be what I'd want to do.
Amazing. Katie, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us today and illuminate so many topics that clearly need to have a light shed on them. It's been, I knew it would be fun, but it was way fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Listeners, once again, today's episode of Startup Hustle was sponsored by Fullscale.io. Also, keep in mind, you can find us on Instagram at Startup Hustle Podcast or check out our YouTube channel. We will catch you again soon.